Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. So today is Friday. It's 11:16. It's pouring rain. So what else is new at this point? So hope everyone's doing good. Last night we played a pretty fun benefit show for Midcoast Music Academy, which is a local school here in Midcoast, Maine that does amazing work working with kids and just the community abroad, bringing culture and music. So we did a fundraiser for their summer program, and it was cool. We played an hour set or 45-minute set with Quantum. It was it was kind of funny because I feel like we were so different than the rest of the groups that played. So we kind of stuck out in a good way or a bad way, but we got I don't know got a good response, and it was nice playing on. Well, originally the show was going to be outside, but then it was moved inside because of the rain, and plus it was freezing cold yesterday. It was so weird. It's still chilly out as hell. And we ended up they ended up moving the show inside, and which was better. But the show was ended up being at the Oceanside High School, which is the high school in Rockland, Maine. The show originally was going to be at like an outdoor place by the water, but it's too cold and rainy, and it's May. But we ended up playing inside at on a big stage. So that was kind of a cool. It's a big auditorium, pretty nice sound system. Ryan Moody did the sound. He did a great job with the sound and everything. So, but it was fun. It was nice playing on a big stage. So yeah, it was kind of a funny experience because like everything else was, all the other music like the whole day. It was a long day, and it was like from 2:30, 2 o'clock to about. I got there about 2:30, and then by the time I left, it was 8:30. So it was a long day, but it was great, and obviously for a really great cause. And there was music throughout. A couple of the kids ensembles played, and then a bunch of the adults that were involved, local musicians. Aiden Kaczynski played, Ryan Moody's band played, and then there was some solo guitar singer songwriters that played, and then we played. So it was kind of an odd pairing, but it was pretty fun. The I didn't know what to expect going into it because you know our music Quantum is like, I don't know. I think I'm always surprised by the band in a lot of ways because I feel like, well, on one hand, I think people sometimes think that we are like a DJ. A lot of times, which still happens in a lot of on a lot of our show at a lot of our shows, or the perception, because we don't like there isn't that traditional setup like when you go see a band where there's like a drum set, guitar, guitars, guitar amp, and vocals and all that kind of stuff. We, I essentially use mostly electronic equipment. I have a pretty minimalist setup, but we do everything. Try to do everything live. I don't have backing tracks. That's one thing. Again, that's one thing I try not to do live. Like that's one thing I honestly I don't which I don't like about live electronic groups sometimes. It's not always the case, but a lot of times it happens. And what, people out there who might not know exactly what I'm talking about, but backing tracks is basically, you have, well, there's a lot of pop stars who do it nowadays, even in like a rock context. But in the electronic world, especially when it comes to performance, backtracks are basically, tracks, beats, and grooves and melodies, and the whole tune is kind of structured and it's all set and all basically put together beforehand. And essentially, the performer essentially just presses play. And so that gets piped through the system. And then that particular artist might sing live over it or accompany it somehow with some kind of other instrumentation. Or there might be just, dancers. So, which can be cool, but a lot of the times most of the time I don't like, me personally, I don't like that. I like to. That's one of the things why I love seeing live music. Why I love seeing a live band, because it's in the moment. It's being created from nothing, and it's about that kind of human interaction. And it's not gonna be perfect. It can be really fantastic, but there's going to be a little bit a bit of ebb and flow, because you're going to be playing with each other, playing with another person. So there's like, it's that heartbeat. So there's going to be some kind of fluctuation. There's always going to be a little bit of a shift and change, but it's human, and that's what I love about live music. So what I've tried to do with Quantum is to really keep that mindset. Even though most of the music that we are playing is electronic based, I try to go into it with keeping it as organic as possible, meaning that it's all going to be, pretty much everything that we do is all live and in the moment. I have preset grooves and beats that are in my drum machines that I use, and presets for other people. For again, people who might not know what that is, presets are basically, when you get a drum machine or a sequencer, they have, there's like factory grooves or beats that are built into the system, like a hip hop groove or a funk groove or a bossa nova groove. So I do use that in the context of the music that we do, live and in the studio. But what I do is I try to chop up those beats. I try to manipulate them so they don't sound like factory beats, and I try to alter them in a way that to make it more musical. And then the other thing that I try to do, which I do live, is I record a lot of the stuff live. When it comes to percussion, I record. I have an external mic, a mic that runs from my equipment, and I can record percussion and drums, and I can overdub things. So I can kind of curate the beats and more or less make them into my own thing for those particular songs or those grooves. And then with the vocals and keyboards that I use, the same thing. Like, all of that stuff is live. So it's all created live in a moment. I don't usually go in with any prearranged stuff or prearranged things. So I try to make it as live as humanly possible, like kind of that rock band mentality. And then my great friend Mike Whitehead plays bass in the band, and he uses lots of effects, and all of that stuff is obviously very, very live. So we try to keep it as live as possible. And it's interesting too, because I don't usually I don't usually go into a show. I work on the material all the time and practice it. And then I've been writing a lot of new material, but I don't go in with a set list. And because I the reason I don't is because I feel like every vibe is totally different. Last weekend we played at the All Roads Festival, which is probably the best music festival here in Maine. And we were fortunate enough to play twice before at the All Roads Festival about 2 years ago. And that kind of thing is, when we play there, or at least the spots that we've had, have been more, of a party atmosphere where people kind of want to rage and dance and have fun and drink beer and all that kind of stuff. And then a lot of shows that we've played, it's not really a dance per se environment. People are listening, or it's even more of a background thing. Or, the space can be kind of a mellow setting too. So we have to like adjust to all of those things. So we always, I try to always adjust to the room, because every gig is totally different. And so, like playing at the All Roads Festival this past weekend, we um, we followed. We were really the only electronic group on the bill that this year, and so in the past years they've always had lots of electronic artists, and so, but this year we were the only ones on the bill. We were, thankfully asked to do it, but we followed someone who was basically Alice Lamoche, who is a jazz folk singer, and her music is good. but it's very mellow, very very mellow. And she basically played before us at the All Roads Festival, and it was just super quiet, mellow music with just guitar, piano, and vocals, and it's super stripped down. And we played after her, so it's like, and then there were after us there was going to be two rock bands that were going to be pretty, pretty intense. And there's one local band that's probably the best band in the state right now, Scobie. They headlined the whole thing, and so we were like before all of this was going to happen. So I wanted to figure out a way that we could, segue from what Alice's set was. That was very. It was cool, but it was very very quiet, very minimalist, but very very quiet, mellow music. So had to figure out, okay, how do we want to segue to that? We want to kind of like keep the vibe going, but like take that vibe and slowly build it up. So that's what we did with that show, where we started out that set with a really mellow ambient piece that we use a lot, "The Stars Beneath Our Feet," which is a real stripped down kind of, you know super minimalist ambient piece. And then we segued into more dance stuff. So it's like that's one of the big things that we try to always do, is to kind of curate it, create a vibe. And again, I find a lot of the times if I go in with the mindset of, oh, I'm going to play this tune to start off, or these couple of tunes in the beginning, it's always like it's always different, and then we kind of have to adjust to that. So yeah, but it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. And then yesterday's show was not really a dance environment. There wasn't, any alcohol. It wasn't a party environment. People wanted to have a good time, and it was all like, you know, there was only one band with drums, so the music was pretty mellow last night. So we had to kind of, shift into that, So and but it was fun, and I didn't know, like, it was weird because I didn't know how people would, because some of our stuff, I think our stuff has a certain accessibility, and the people that connect with our music, like, seem to be really into it. And then I know our music has a lot of strange kind, I have a lot of eclectic influences in the band, and I like weird music, and I consider the music that we do to be very weird. I don't feel it's weird in the typical sense, but it just feels organic, and that's what it is. And so I didn't know how that part of it was going to go, and it was really funny. But it seemed to go over really well, because when we started playing, people were loud that were there. In the first part of the day, there wasn't a whole lot of people there, and then more and more people showed. And by the time we played, it seemed like there was a pretty good amount of people there. Like, we were kind of in the middle, and so when we played, there was like, I couldn't hear a pin drop. Like, everybody was, I guess, listening. I don't know. And then at the end, there was a big applause, and that was really cool. So it was fun. You just never know. And because I know our music it's got a certain appeal. I think, our music has a lot of melody, and there's a dance factor, but a lot of our music is kind of weird and strange for people. So that can be not everybody's cup of tea, and that's totally cool. But anyway, that's enough of that. So today I wanted to talk. I want to talk a little bit about the last Quantum shows, and the All Roads Festival was really great. That was a blast. We really kind of had things built up to a nice dance party, and it was a great segue for the rock bands, and it was super fun. I had a lot of friends that came out on Saturday when we played, so that was really great. And they have an amazing sound company that runs the sound for the entire festival. So it's just great. We didn't have much time to do a sound check. We just kind of like plugged in and went for it. So that's a little bit dicey, but it's nice to be able to do a sound check. But a lot of times, I don't know. But anyway, today's video, I want to talk about the most recent Quantum shows. And then the other thing I want to talk about, which I'm really, really excited about, is tonight I'm going to go see Wild at Heart by David Lynch. And I'm going to definitely do a review tomorrow. I think I'll have time in the morning to talk about it. I'm super excited to see it. It's going to be at the Waldo Theater tonight at 8 o'clock. It's part of the Waldo After Dark series, which is an amazing series. The last time I was there, they showed Eraserhead, which was a just an incredible experience, just kind of a mind blowing experience to see that on the big screen. And David Lynch, for me, when it comes to, I mean, again, getting back to Quantum, but like for me, there's so many directors, so many films that influence the band, kind of the visual aspect of our band, and especially the music. But I have to say, David Lynch is probably the number one guy. I mean, he really cemented for me the kind of the idea of like the theatrical, trying to have a theatrical, aesthetic with your presentation of your music, and just creating a vibe, a real vibe, through costumes, through lighting, and you know, David Lynch passed away this year, which was really really sad. I was really shocked. And a year before that, Angelo Badalamenti, who is my favorite film composer of all time, also passed away. I think it was a year or two ago. So it was a double whammo. And, again, his music is, when it comes to film scores, has the biggest influence on Quantum. So, a real seismic thing for me. So he passed away this year, earlier this year. So the wonderful folks at Waldorf After Dark have been doing like a tribute series of of his masterwork. My favorite David Lynch film of all time is Blue Velvet, but my first movie that I ever saw of his was Wild at Heart. I saw Wild at Heart when I was like in middle school, and I that movie blew me the fuck away in every way, shape, or form. Like I had never, even today, I own it now on Blu-ray. I did a show on Wild at Heart a long time ago, actually. Probably it might have been one of the first videos I did for this channel. It was like at least 2 or 3 years ago. I got a really amazing Blu-ray collection or edition of Wild at Heart, and it's just amazing, and it's packed with all kinds of special features. It was a seminal movie for me and seismic. That it introduced me. That was the first David Lynch movie I had ever seen, and I was just like I had never seen anything like that. A movie that was so dark, brutal. It was one of the first movies where I saw brutal violence. Like I had, again, grew up watching slasher movies, but this was different. This was like a deeper, darker, more disturbing, kind of fever dream of an experience seeing Wild at Heart. And it's at its core, it's a real deep, love story, and it was the first movie of where I saw was introduced to the amazing actors, Nick Cage, who is my favorite actor of all time, still is. I love Nicolas Cage. He's one of those actors that he can be in a movie that's, not so great, but he is always amazing in it. So, and Wild at Heart is one of my favorite films of his. I think my favorite Nicolas Cage movie might be Mandy, which came out a few years back, which is a total fucking masterpiece. But Wild at Heart is probably my second favorite. But there's so many great films. And so it was my first introduction to Nicolas Cage, and then also Laura Dern, one of the greatest actresses of our time, has worked with David Lynch before, other times. His last film that he did, Inland Empire, she was in that. Fantastic actress, so incredible, one of my favorite actresses. And then also Willem Dafoe. It was the first movie I ever saw Willem Dafoe, who of course is one of the most important and iconic master actors in the world. And he's just so prolific, and he was just in Robert Eggers' Nosferatu. I mean, he can't do anything wrong. So it was like a real big thing, like seeing something so surreal and something so strange, so dark, and yet it had so much heart and soul. and my first introduction to these amazing actors. So I'm super excited to see this movie on the big screen. It's definitely, because it was the first David Lynch movie I saw as a kid. I think I saw it when I was 11 or 12. It has a deep thing for me, obviously, and it's easily one of my best, one of my favorite films of his. Blue Velvet's probably my favorite, but Wild at Heart is a close second. And you know, uh, seeing Eraserhead last month was just jaw dropping. That which is odd, but I saw that movie. I only saw that movie for the first time about 10 or 12 years ago, and it's a fucking masterpiece. Like it was amazing. I own it on DVD. I don't own a ton of Blu-ray David Lynch films. I own Blue Velvet. I have an amazing, beautiful edition of that. I have Wild at Heart. I think I have a couple more, and I have a bunch of his other films, Lost Highway, and I think I have Mulholland Drive, Inland Empire. I have those on DVD. I definitely need to upgrade my David Lynch collection and get Blu-ray editions because that's the way to go. So I'm super super excited to see Wild at Heart. I actually have not seen Wild at Heart in quite some time, and I definitely have never seen it on the big screen. And seeing what they did in the version of Eraserhead on the big screen, which was mind blowing. I'm so excited to see what this will be like on the big screen. So I wanted to do a little video today talking about my excitement to see it, and then also just a little talk about the past quantum shows, but mainly about going to see Wild at Heart. So I'll see it tonight around 8 o'clock. It's going to be at the Waldorf Theater. So super super stoked, and then I'll probably do, if I have time, which I think I do. So I have to go out of town tomorrow, but I think we're leaving like a little bit later in the day for a show, and so but I'll probably do a big review of Wild at Heart tomorrow, which will go, which will be pretty detailed about the whole experience. So thanks again, and we will see you very soon. Peace.